And one of the most interesting political developments of recent years has been the resurgence of interest in and support for socialism, as reflected in polls and as also reflected in the growth of membership in the Democratic Socialists of America. The DSA, as they are known, are about to have their annual conference in Chicago, and here to talk about that with us is Jamie Tyberg. Jamie is a member of New York City DSA. She serves on its Climate Change Working Group Steering Committee. She also works for New York Communities for Change and a number of rent activism groups there, as well as the Fight for 15 movement. So first of all, Jamie, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you are part of DSA, and I assume, therefore, that you're part of the New York contingent that is going to Chicago for the conference. Is that right?
Yes. We held citywide elections, and members voted for the delegates to represent our chapter.
So tell us what happens at these conferences for people who, well, first of all, let's back up a stage. I gave a very brief introduction to the Democratic Socialists of America. I know a little bit about the history, but give us, if you would, have just brief overview of the organization.
That is actually a good question. Like many of the DSA members, I'm very new to the organization itself. Many of us joined following the election, and frankly, I can't speak to much of its history, and okay, I don't know that, yeah.
Then I'll tell you what, in a gesture of solidarity and comradeship, Jamie, I will tell you what I know about the history of the Democratic Socialists of America. I believe it was founded, if I'm not mistaken, in the early 1960s. There was a very prominent writer named Michael Harrington who wrote a book called The Other America, which brought poverty in the United States to a lot of people's attention for the first time. In the late 50s, I believe it was. I believe Michael Harrington and some others formed a group with the objective of raising the profile of socialist ideas in the United States and working for socialist change within the context of primarily of the Democratic Party rather than third parties. I think it percolated along with a certain level of membership, quite low, to be honest, for many years until the presidential candidacy of Bernie Sanders, for whom I worked as a lead writer in 2015 when Bernie ran. He was identified, he was an independent, self-identified as a democratic socialist, as part of the resurgence that helped part of the resurgence of interest in democratic socialism and may have been a major contributor to the rise of popularity of the DSA. And I will shut up very quickly, I promise, and let you talk. And also a lot of polls showing that especially younger people in this country, recent polls showed have a more favorable impression of socialism than of capitalism. So that's me, I'm done. So does that fit with what you know?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's pretty easy.
So when did you get involved with the organization?
Well, I became a dues-paying member, an official member this January. But I guess, I've been involved with different activists and radical circles here in New York City. So I had, been in touch with DSA folks before, but I had not joined officially until this year.
So when you say you'd been involved with other groups, I know you were at Communities for Change. I know you've done, you're in the middle of a rent strike now, which actually I kind of like to talk to you about. But how did you get politically active in the first place?
Ever? Or with
Yeah, ever. Yeah, just you. Just talking about you now for a second.
Just me, yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Well, let's see. I was born in Korea. And I moved here to America when I was 9. So I guess just right off the bat, being an immigrant and a woman of color living in suburban Georgia, the political was very much personal for me from the get-go. And when I moved to New York, getting involved in, different fights and different struggles was so easy. So it came pretty naturally for me to start picking up on, protests and rallies and meeting the right folks.
Okay, and then what drew you to DSA as an organization?
Yeah, so, like I said, many of the members are new to DSA, and I don't know that it's really our, loyalty to DSA that's, keeping us, involved and active, but rather our, belief in socialism and that, we can't justify doing any other work. So here in New York, when Trump was elected, we saw so many different grassroots groups, ramping up their, emergency rapid response rallies and et cetera. And of all the socialist groups in New York City, I saw that DSA was present at all of them. DSA was the one mobilizing their membership. DSA was the one, really building this power of, so many of us and winning tangible changes with, concrete, actionable goals.
Is that where the rent strike comes from? Is that, a chance? Was that DSA inspired? Or was it just a parallel effort? Or
No, the rent strike was separate from DSA, but because, we have DSA members in our building and, more and more DSA members in our neighborhood, we are now, getting support from DSA members, and we are helping lead a rent overcharge workshop with DSA this coming weekend. So it's all sort of, mushing up together now.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that's how it ought to be. And again, we're talking to Jamie Tyberg, who is a member of New York City Democratic Socialists of America, going to Chicago for the big conference there. I wish I could go, actually, but I can't. So tell us, I'm curious, what's your rent strike about?
It's the same old story. We have neighborhoods in Brooklyn where real estate developers are buying up all of the buildings and completely gutting them and renovating them, and a lot of the times illegally increasing rent on rent-stabilized buildings, and they do this by harassing the tenants who've been there a long time. And most of them are low-income, communities of color. So that was happening in our building. Our landlord was harassing the long-term tenants. He had cut off their heat for the last 2 winters. They were having to, heat up water in their microwaves so they can bathe because they had no heat, no cooking gas, hot water, etc. And our building was actually a really interesting case because it's not fully filled by gentrifiers just yet. Of the 8 units, 3 of them are long-term and 5 of them are, some of the newer, gentrifying type tenants. But because, the building had so many great organizers and just good people, we started talking to our neighbors and hearing about their struggles. And we started a tenant association.
And did you try to negotiate with the owners, or?
Yes, we did, and we have a pro bono housing lawyer that's helping us, but they did not want to bite. So we are about to enter the 3rd month of our rent strike.
And is everybody participating, all the tenants?
All but 1 unit.
Okay. So what are your demands?
Respect. Well, for one, we need the building to return to its rent-stabilized prices. And 2, the end to all harassment for the long-term tenants. 3, for the landlord to give back the money that he has essentially stolen from us. And that's about it. And I mean, we have bigger demands, like for our city to, not give any more money to real estate developers. But that's down the road.
No, it seems perfectly, it's great, old school organizing, which is what I consider that. And by the way, when I call it old school organizing, it's really high praise because, I think people get really, you can only go so far online, signing email petitions or whatever. There's a time when people have to get together in real space, face to face, and organize and mobilize and work. So I'm really glad that you guys are doing it. Now, do you know what the agenda is for the meeting in Chicago, since you're one of the representatives going? Do you know what you guys are going to talk about, vote about, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a large portion of it will be, debates and resolutions and the election of the next National Political Committee, which will serve for 2 years, I believe. And, again, I'm a new member to DSA, but there's a good consensus among the older DSA members that we have no idea what to expect from this convention, because, as you said, we have over 24,000 members nationwide. We have never been this big since probably the Second World War. And we have never had a National Political Committee election that is this competitive. So a lot of, discussion, a lot of debates, but also a lot of fun. We have workshops on, all the different struggles that are going on, with a lot of room for the local chapters themselves to present on what they're working on, and also, cross-chapter working and on different issues that are pertinent to social, like, climate justice and racial justice, prison abolition, et cetera.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be... Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jamie. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and a couple parties.
Well, parties are an essential. If I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. So, yeah, I think the parties are great. It sounds like it's going to be great. A lot of cross-collaboration, a lot of discussion, some election. I'm dying to see how those elections turn out. 2 more questions for you, but the last one will be easy. So the second to last question is, so you must have in among the membership, the committees you're on and so on, there must be a smattering of real old-timers as well as people that have come in the last year or two. Are they happy to see all of you, or they tend to be like, oh, these crazy kids? Well, how's that relationship between the old-timers and the newer folks?
I will say it hasn't been smooth sailing, that's for sure. But I think that's a great thing. I don't think, if we don't have any agitation or confrontation amongst ourselves, then I don't think we're, doing anything right. So it's been a growing process, absolutely. Yeah, as you say, we have members. It's kind of really interesting when you look at the age group of DSA members now. It's a lot of millennials, like folks in their 20s and early 30s, and then we skip, and we have members that are in their 60s and 70s. Right. Who are active socialists, back in the day, and are plugging into, work with us. And we also have a YDSA, which is the youth organization of it, which are, high school to college students. The youngest NYC delegate is actually 17 years old. So it's been a lot of, learning and also unlearning.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I guess I'm delighted to see it. And I guess my very last question for you is the easiest one, which is, when is the conference, in case anybody listening wants to get in at the last minute?
We are officially a week away. So it will kick off with an evening reception next Thursday in Chicago.
Okay, great. Well, listen, have a great time. Go out there and advance the cause, and say hello to everybody for the 0 hour. Jamie Tyberg, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having us.